Go, everyone.
Now back to Miller and Moulton.
All right, now we're getting somewhere.
No. This is Miller and Moulton.
You're live.
"29 minutes past the hour. Thanks so much for being with us. You know the deal. We're Miller and Moulton. This is Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio, 103.3, 105.9 FM. You can stream the show, millerandmoulton.com. You could be looking at not just the two of us, but Seth Everett joining us from his Jersey home with his Jersey Devils t-shirt on. Yeah. A week early, you know. I mean, season doesn't start for another week.
They had a live video of a practice, like a scrimmage, and I went, "Oh, that's what the logo looks like. Oh, cool."
So you watched a live practice, is what you're telling us?
Wow.
30 seconds.
Do you know where that puts you on the goober scale? I mean, you think about what you just said out loud. I mean, we have this recorded, you know.
I know, and my team lost on March 10th by 2-goal lead to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And if I had known that Rudy Gobert was going to test positive and that was going to be the line of demarcation to the bubble, my Devils didn't get to go to the bubble because we lost that goddamn game to the Pittsburgh Penguins that I didn't even watch. I'm never going to let my team down again.
Much like the Dr. Pepper commercial, it was your fault, Seth.
It was fault.
Completely your fault. Hey, we bring you on for baseball, but obviously you're a sports guy. You follow all of it. What would be, you know, we've been talking a little bit of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The finalist vote comes out. There's 15 guys on that. David and I can't find two that we don't think are Hall of Famers.
Yeah, they're all right.
Right. But then baseball on the other side, I don't remember which voter on his card basically didn't check off anybody and said no one was deserving. These Hall of Fames are so completely the opposite on how they do business. What would you do to fix the Baseball Hall of Fame?
You're just teeing it up for me until this morning. Give me a couple of softballs.
Well, what do I want to do? Talk about some guy that signed for 2 years for $10 million? I want to ask a question that you have.
The voting process is a sham. 100 years ago, the Baseball Writers Association of America started. That's a union. And the Hall of Fame just married them. And because everybody who covered baseball was a writer, they just said the people who vote are the Baseball Writers Association of America. And it's not to say that I don't like the writers. I mean, the writers are my friends, my dearest friends. They're probably the reason I came up with my podcast. You know, I have nothing against the writers, but the thought that the Hall of Fame does not allow electronic media in to get a vote is a crime. Vince Scully should have a vote. Bob Costas, Carl Ravitch, Susan Waldman should have a vote. It's not to be self-serving. I sleep just fine not having a Hall of Fame vote, but I've covered the game for 26 years. And there are people who cover obituaries that are writers who cover obituaries now that are still in that union and they still have Hall of Fame votes. There are people who vote for the Hall of Fame that haven't seen a baseball game in 5 years. And it's the whole voting process is a complete and utter sham. This is not a baseball rule. This is not a baseball deal. This is a separate museum. They have their own stipulations and rules. The president of the Hall of Fame, Jeff Adelson, left, and now there's new people running the Hall of Fame that I don't know as well. Tim Mead is a nice guy, but we're not close like I was close with Jeff Adelson. So, you know, I've kind of backed off this whole thing, but as long as the voting process is such. Now, when I say conservative and liberal, I'm not talking politics, but I do believe that if the electronic media were allowed to vote, a lot more steroid guys would have gotten in. McGuire would have been over 50% if radio and television was allowed to vote. This was way back when. And I think that the voting dynamic would be completely different if the voting constituency was different.
I don't like, and you brought up liberal and conservative, I don't like the fact.
I like the labels, but that's the only way I know how to describe it.
But you're talking about it from a baseball standpoint. Right. But I do think that some politics is entering this year with one particular candidate. It has shocked me that those that have already released their ballots publicly, the overwhelming number of them do not have Curt Schilling as one of their 10 potential votes. I am really stunned. I'm actually angered by it. Okay. That we are judging him. By the way, it specifically says when it talks about character, it talks about character in relation to a player's contribution to his team, not post-career and whether or not he's a failed business person and he said some, bat blank things. It's about him as a player. You've got to be kidding me. He is literally one of the 3 greatest postseason pitchers of all time. I mean, and he won more games than Don Drysdale. All right. I mean, I can go right down the list. You've got to be kidding me. Of course he's a Hall of Famer, and he may not get in, and his time is running out.
I don't feel as strongly about it as you do. Curt Schilling is a scumbag, and it's not about politics. He has said things about Muslims that are disgusting.
Yes, but he didn't say that when he was playing, Seth. And they have to be separate.
It doesn't matter.
Sure it does.
It absolutely matters.
That's like saying Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer before he did steroids, so we ignore the fact that he did steroids. You can't ignore the whole.
No. Actually,
person.
Seth, Bonds did steroids while he was a player. Find me all of the things that Curt Schilling said when he was playing baseball.
Well, to that end, players all knew, and writers knew too. It just was a different time, and people didn't. Social media didn't exist, and we didn't write these things.
But Seth,
and they knew that he was a scumbag.
So what, though? I mean, and I'm not trying to be flippant. So what? We're judging him as a baseball player.
I understand that. What my argument has always been about Curt Schilling was until Jack Morris was in the Hall of Fame, I never considered Curt Schilling.
Fair enough.
Up until 2 years ago, I never considered Curt Schilling.
That's fair enough.
That was always been my stance on Curt Schilling. Now that Jack Morris is in the Hall of Fame, if you want to make the case for Curt Schilling, I don't care as much. I'm not as passionate about it. What I do know is he's easily on the Seth Everett no interview list, and he was a scumbag way before social media got involved.
Fine. But listen, Lawrence Taylor's a bad dude. O.J. Simpson killed 2 people.
Wait a minute.
No. Apples to oranges.
If I called Seth out on the Bonds thing, I'm going to call you on that because they're separate Hall of Fames and they have separate rules. Football is very clear. It only matters what happens in the white lines.
No, that's true. My bad.
But the fact that matters retroactively, then let's take Ty Cobb out of the Hall of Fame because he was an ass too.
Understood. I understand that argument. I understand. My argument has been when you have a older conservative, and when I say conservative, doesn't mean right wing, but it's older conservative voting constituency, they are going to punish Curt Schilling. If you let radio and television announcers in there, Curt Schilling's a Hall of Famer. The only difference, David, I'm being completely honest, I could give a crap and I wouldn't watch his Hall of Fame speech.
And that's fine. But Seth, if you had a vote, would you vote for Curt Schilling, yes or no?
I would have. After Jack Morris.
And that's fine. So last year and
Jack
this year
Morris was not in the Hall of Fame, no,
Okay.
I didn't. Because Jack Morris is a better pitcher, in my estimation, than Curt Schilling was. And Curt Schilling's numbers are skewed because he had 3 rounds. And he did.
I understand, but he was great in all
numbers
3.
Are skewed, and it's comparing eras to eras, and it's hard.
I understand, but he started 19 playoff games. He lost 2. I mean,
I understand that, but he started 19 playoff games.
I understand.
Bernie Williams has 100 RBIs in the postseason.
Right. No, I know. I mean, you played for the Yankees in the late 90s. Your playoff numbers are obscene, right? It's why people argue Andy Pettitte being in the Hall of Fame, and they bring up his postseason numbers. And I'm like, Andy Pettitte's not a Hall of Famer. Andy Pettitte was a very good pitcher on great teams. That doesn't make him a Hall of Famer.
That's right. And
he's not a
my
great
argument
player.
for 10 years was, don't talk to me about Curt Schilling. Jack Morris is getting railroaded, but in 2018, they voted Jack Morrison. And think about how long it took to get Jack Morrison. Again,
Right.
My argument for the Hall of Fame is the voting process. The voting process is an absolute sham.
But I mean, literally, there are writers who have said, okay, I'm not voting for him because I'm afraid of what he might say in his Hall of Fame induction speech. I mean, I can't believe
There
he'd
are
say that
writers
out
who have
loud.
said, I have a Hall of Fame vote, and I cover hockey. These writers are ridiculous. The whole voting process is a sham.
Oh, don't kid yourself. We've had the Heisman conversation because it's the same way with that award. That
Right.
people who don't cover college football anymore have Heisman votes. So it's no different in a lot of these awards. That's kind of the way it goes. And Seth, you're spot on with the fact that these antiquated systems have no desire to change that's the bigger thing is we could sit here, Seth, you could stay for our bonus Twitch hour. We could do 2 hours on this. And the fact of the matter is,
I'm free.
Good. The fact of the matter is there's nothing that's going to change because the antiquated systems don't want to change.
Right.
And that's the sad part of it because
it's just an old system.
Broadcasters for years.
It's just an old system. The only reason why Rivera got the unanimous was because they were publishing the ballots, and the writers, who normally are the snakes in the grass that don't vote for Cal Ripken or Ken Griffey Jr. or any of these clowns. The idea is they're worried that their ballots are going to be published. That's the only reason why Rivera got unanimous. Rivera is not a better Hall of Famer than the names I just mentioned.
Right.
The whole process needs to be tossed. The Hall of Fame needs to come into the 21st century.
He's Seth Everett. Sports with Friends, Hall of Justice are his two great podcasts. Follow him on Twitter at Seth_Everett. So in the last week,
you have a minute because I can tell a great Hall of Fame story.
Yeah,
like a heartwarming, amazing Hall of Fame story.
Okay.
Jeff Idelson used to be the president of the Hall of Fame. And in 2015, my best friend, Darrell Hamilton, who played 13 years in the majors, was tragically killed. In late 2015, right around the Hall of Fame induction, when Pedro Martinez was getting inducted, I called Jeff Idelson and just said, hey, Darrell Hamilton's kids are going to be in Cooperstown for a baseball tournament. Is there any way you could just get them passes to the Hall of Fame? Unbeknownst to me, not only did they get him passes, they had the Hall of Fame. This is Hall of Fame induction week. This was the week of the ceremony. This is the biggest week for the Hall of Fame. They set up a makeshift kiosk with Darrell Hamilton's memorabilia, his jersey. Darrell had the first ever hit in interleague play, so they had his helmet and his bat, and they put an exhibit so that when his kids, who had just lost their dad, walked into that hallowed museum, they saw an exhibit for Darrell Hamilton. And to me, the people who run the Hall of Fame are the salt of the earth. They are the best people I've ever known. And when I say the voting process is what I challenge, the people who are involved in the Hall of Fame are the nicest human beings I'll ever know.
To make his point, there's a book over my shoulder that says Baseball Hall of Fame. Bert Sugar wrote it. Bert was a longtime guest of our show and a terrific.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that.
And Bert said, the one thing I remember about this book is that Bert said that basically the basement of the hall, what you're talking about, those exhibits, that you could spend weeks, if not months, in the basement of the Hall of Fame of all of the different things. And that's what this book is about, of all of the things that aren't on display constantly in the hall and what they have there. And it's an amazing book. And as I redid my studio after the holidays, I wanted to give my Bert Sugar his spot because he's been so great to us for so many years. But to Seth's point, that's really what it is. The Hall of Fame is so much bigger than what you see there, and that monthly it changes, and that there's so many different displays and things that are just down in the basement that you really don't ever get to see.
And they set this thing up for him. They didn't have to do that. I asked them for passes. I didn't ask them for anything other than that. And they made this whole to-do, and I've seen pictures of it, and it looks like it belongs. It looks like it wasn't makeshift. And so these kids, 11 years old, just lost their dad. They saw his stuff in the Hall of Fame, and I thought that was the nicest thing those people have ever done. And I the last time I was at the Hall of Fame was Ken Griffey Jr., and I'm not going back because it's hot as molasses there.
It can be the village of Cooperstown, New York.
Of those, and it's a beautiful ceremony. I'll watch it on TV.
I will say, though, the lake is right there. If it's just a little cooler, the breeze can come off it. It can be beautiful.
Dave Winfield's speech still going on.
Hey, I'm hearing that because it's a collectively bargained and all that I guess the players, if they want, could just start showing up in mid-February, because in the labor agreement, that's when it says they could show up, that they could just kind of force the owner's hand if they just start showing up. Is that true?
They can show up. It doesn't become organized. What I have heard, and I've talked to both sides, the owners really just want fans in the stands. I've told you guys I'm a proponent of fans in stands, limited fans in stands, no matter where it is. I think you can do it safely. Outside stadiums. Remember, I was a big proponent of the NHL playing their games outside. I just want outside is different than inside. And I have heard that they're talking about 100 games starting in June, and that's just kind of the way they're leaning right now, to start in June, but have fans in the stands. That's what I'm hearing. 100 games. They don't think they could sustain 162 without fans. Their business model just won't allow it, and the owners are going to be steadfast on that, and the players are going to have no choice. So I don't think that's a collective bargaining thing. It's going to become one, but right now this is literally just they're looking at what happened in 2020 and they don't want to replicate it.
So spring training is going to happen in Fort Myers in late April?
According to what I had heard, and again, I'm not reporting this. This is that's what's being talked about. They're talking about that. If there's dramatic changes with the virus, that's one thing. If there's dramatic changes with the vaccine, that's another thing. It comes down to that, because they need to be able to make sure those games are profitable, and they weren't last year, and then they know it.
I'm curious what the profit number is. Is it 15,000 people? Is it 10,000 people? I mean, what's the profit? The break-even number, not the, we're making money like we normally do, but what is the break-even number for a game?
Here's an idea. Ask the Rays or the Marlins. They probably have a really good idea.
Pretty good. The idea, for me, and I said this, we've talked about this in December in the NFL. I was at the Meadowlands, and I thought that place should have had 10,000 people easily, safely, like you could do it. I'm not talking about Texas with the 35,000 people in Cowboy Stadium, but I think you can do some semblance of a happy medium, and I think that's the key and what the owners are going to have. But remember, the CBA is up, so everything that they do is going to be predicated on that, and that's why I think this is going to be as contentious as ever.
All right, Sports with Friends Hall of Justice. What do you got?
Sports with Friends. Jane McManus from Deadspin, and she was longtime ESPN writer and announcer, and she came on back in March, right when Rudy Gobert tested positive, and we were like, what the hell's going to happen? And we look back at what we saw, what worked, what didn't. And then we tried to put a spin on 2021. How does this sports year shake out? How do we have all these things? How do we do them right? And that kind of a Happy New Year kind of positivity 2021 podcast. Hall of Justice, there's a new Batman animated film, and it's set in the 1970s, and it's a tribute to the blaxploitation and kung fu movies of the 1970s. And it takes place in the 1970s. It's called Batman Soul of the Dragon, and I interview the cast, including Kelly Hu, who's been in X-Men, and she was in Arrow, and Michael J. White, who was Mike Tyson in that Tyson movie. And we have all of them, not together. We have 4 short interviews, and that comes out tomorrow for the Hall of Justice.
That's awesome. He's Seth Everett. Sports with Friends and Hall of Justice are the two great.
Can I show something on Twitch? Oh, I'll wait till the break. I brought props.
Good.
Sports with Friends, Hall of Justice. Follow him on Twitter at Seth_Everett. If you're watching on Twitch, props are next. If you're listening on the radio, the good, the bad, and the ugly is next on Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio.
Ooh, that's fancy. Okay, ready?
Yes.
So in the 2000s, when I was at MLB, I worked with Todd McFarlane, the artist, and he did the McFarlane figures. And in my office, and I'll show you guys a picture. I have about 45 of them hanging on my wall, like these figures. And over the break, I went down to the basement. I was cleaning something out, and I found this bag of the guys that didn't make the cut. And I'm going to do a Twitch show where I sell these on eBay. And so this is my Jim Edmonds.
Do the math. Taking care
We're
of
going to sell this guy.
Oh, wow. With the cards. All right.
Nice.
These are like the also rans. These weren't going to make the cut. Kevin Brown.
family company.
Well, Kevin, this is random 2005. Kevin Brown.
Award-winning full service, repairs, and
Brought Lance Berkman from the All-Star game.
MyPoolDoctor.com.
Who the hell's Kevin Brown with in 2005?
He was with the Dodgers.
Gotcha.
And then my favorite. This is the one that's going to fetch the most money. My Toronto Blue Jays, Eric Hinsky. Shocking that it didn't make the cut.
Nestled
So,
between
those are my
Shocking.
at only $3. The new
All right.
sandwiches.
All right,
You
see
excited about
All right.
about the Devils?
If by chance, Seth, my wife connects with this guy, I will get him for you.
Dave
My
Filoni,
brother-in-law was just geeking out when he found it. So Eve grabbed the yearbook and she's showing me this guy. And, you know, I mean, like, I go, were you friends? She goes, yeah, we got along. She got along with everybody. She's nice.
That's crazy. There's a documentary on the making of the Mandalorian, and he's the centerpiece of the whole thing.
Right. Like that's, I mean, the way my brother-in-law described him is he is at the center of the Star Wars universe right now.
Yeah. But when you sent it to me, when you said Dave Filoni, do you know him? And I'm thinking Florida State,
Right.
Southwest Florida,
Baseball player, right.
some random baseball player. Like what? I was like, what's the context? Where are you getting this? And you were the guy last week who didn't know what the Mandalorian was.
I don't. That's why I texted you, because it meant nothing to me. It meant absolutely zero to me. But I mean, like, you know, you go through Mount Lebanon High School where my wife went to school. Like Mark Cuban went to school there. I mean, there have been a lot of
Cool.
famous people, but you know, my brother-in-law, who I actually have got to get him into your podcast because he's in your world. He loves that stuff. He was just, when he found out yesterday, like he couldn't stop. Oh my God, how well did you know? And he was geeking out, and he's 2 years older than her.
That's so cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, so I thought, I mean, I guarantee my boy Seth's going to geek out over this.
Yeah. It was so weird. I was taking out the garbage, and you're like, "Who's Dave Filoni?" And I'm like, "Who's Dave Filoni?" I'm like, "Why don't I know this guy? Is this a trick question?" It was funny. All right, do your thing.
All right.
You do yours.
Hang on. I got to get it back to this first.
Oh,
And
yeah,
then-
here we go.
Be up here.
Yeah.
And then we got to play Hide Seth.
There you go.
There we go. It's the kid on the seat in front of you on the plane.
Oh my God.
There we go.
Don't show Dave Filoni this.
Never know. It might be what gets him.
These are my favorite ones.
Thanks, buddy. Stay safe.
I'll see you guys.
Bye, Seth.